Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Charles, and I welcome you guys to another episode of the Dreamerspro Show, where we cover everything from sports, hot topics, classic debates, entertainment, and we give you guys a fresh perspective on things and how we see them. And yesterday was huge, right? Yesterday was huge in the NBA because there were a plethora of trades made. The two teams that made the biggest splash in free agency were the Brooklyn Nets and the Philadelphia 76ers. It was no secret whatsoever that two of their stars on the respective teams were unhappy. Ben Simmons, we all know the reasons why Ben Simmons was unhappy being in Philly. We've done so many videos, so we're not going to go into that. However, James Harden also was unhappy with the Brooklyn Nets, and that was something that really came out over the last few weeks. It was something that I was unaware of. And even just today, I read an article on yahoosports.com where they basically entail that at one point during the regular season, James Harden and Kyrie Irving just seemed to be going in separate directions, that James Harden thought that Kyrie was a weird dude, whatever the case was. So it turned out that also James Harden was unhappy with the situation, in Brooklyn. And I think when he went into that situation, he had high expectations, like many of us did. But ultimately, it didn't work out. And I saw a stat yesterday that really shocked me. It turns out that Brooklyn Nets big three of Kyrie Irving, James Harden, Kevin Durant, in 2 years only played a grand total of 16 games together. To me, that is a major disappointment if we're talking about that particular trio, but now things have changed. So after all of those trades were made yesterday, many people in the media were weighing in on who they felt won the trade, right? And yesterday we stumbled upon some comments that Redick made, who also works at ESPN and also has his own show. And he also weighed in and he gave his thoughts on who he thought ultimately won the trade, and he broke it down in his own way. So before we go too far, I want you to take a listen to some of the comments that Redick had to make.
And if I'm being honest, I think they both got better. Now we can, I want to talk a little bit about the ancillary pieces in this trade. But if we just look at the Sixers, what they got James Harden, shot creation, playmaking. Joel doesn't run a ton of pick and rolls as the screener where he's actually rolling. But I think this gives them another option offensively where they can operate two-man together at the top of the key, and maybe we see more rolls out of Joel. That's typically when James has been at his best in pick and rolls. For the Nets, I love this deal for the Nets. I love it for the Nets. I've always said this. Ben Simmons, his best position in the playoffs is as a five-man, a playmaking five that switches multiple positions. He can't do that on the Sixers. No. It's one of the reasons it's always been very clunky in the playoffs. You've got Joel Embiid at the five. He's the best player on the team. You can't play Ben at his best position in the playoffs. I really think that's his best position. There's always this question mark right now with the Nets about Kyrie's availability in the playoffs, and they have a ton of road games coming up. So it will be interesting to see how this plays out in the rest of the regular season in terms of their record and their seeding. But to me, they got better.
Now, for technical reasons, I think he believes that Ben Simmons will be a great fit. However, I have some reservations about the Nets still. Just because Ben Simmons got traded doesn't mean that all of a sudden he's going to change his attitude towards basketball and really enhance his basketball game. Prior to last season, or really prior to the playoffs last year, there were no indications that Ben Simmons was unhappy in Philadelphia. None whatsoever. And he had 3 years to improve his basketball game, and he didn't do any of that. If you go look at and actually last year, if you look at his regular season stats, he actually was regressing. For those of you who don't know, Ben Simmons is a 57% career free throw shooter. 57%. Now, Redick said you're going to put him in the dunker spot, the 5 spot. So unless Ben Simmons is going to be providing the same premium that Shaq did at the 5 spot, because Shaq is a 50% career free throw shooter, but he averaged 25 points, 12 rebounds in the playoffs for his entire playoff career. Unless Ben Simmons is going to be giving you that premium, then that's another question mark that you have to consider, because in the playoffs, the game is going to go slow. The game is going to slow down. You're going to be going to the foul line more, and you still have to make shots. If you look at a player like Joel Embiid doesn't have that issue, because he can stretch the floor, he can hit shots close to the basket, and he can hit his free throws, right? So it's not like, okay, kumbaya, this and this. Now, I do think for sure, without a doubt, he's going to enhance their defense. Because of the big three that they currently have, he's the only one that's made multiple all-defensive teams. But for me, my biggest question mark is this. And it's the one that really surprised me, and I'm not hearing anyone talk about it, which is this. I think the Nets should have traded Kyrie Irving over James Harden. Yes, I think they should have moved Kyrie Irving instead of James Harden. And here's why. It's a very simple reason. James Harden, we knew, was going to be available for them 100% of the time. Kyrie Irving was only going to be there for half the games. Now, I don't know the mandate in New York City, whatever, but the current situation was that was the case. So what essentially means is that by you trading James Harden, you keep Kyrie, that variable still remains. Kyrie Irving can still only play half of the games. Now, some people are saying, well, they may change the rule, but they haven't. So I'm basing my decision based off of what is happening now, not what could happen in the future. So that aspect still does exist, number one. Number two, James Harden does more in a basketball court than Kyrie Irving does. James Harden is a better rebounder, and he's a better playmaker. Kyrie Irving is a more efficient scorer, but James Harden is a volume shooter, so he can also score as much as Kyrie Irving, although he hasn't been doing that this season. So I was surprised that some people didn't talk about that in their analysis. Some people did not factor in the fact that you're trading away a guy that's going to be there for you 100% of the time. And also, just to kind of hammer home this point that I'm trying to make. This season, for the Brooklyn Nets, James Harden has played 44 games. That is almost the same amount of games that Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant have played combined. Those two players in Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant have played a combined 49 games this season. So essentially, you just traded away a guy. You just traded away like an Iron Man, a guy that you knew was going to be available for you 90% of the time or 85% of the time. And now you're keeping Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant is still out. And those are things that you have to consider. Now, the Nets didn't improve their depth, that's for sure, because they added Steph Curry and some others, and they also improved their defense. That is for sure. But I still think there's some variables out there that some people need to consider. Now, for me, I think it's a wait and see game. There's no way you can give a definitive answer about these two teams when they just made the trade, and neither of these players have played basketball. Neither of these players have even started playing with their new teams. And even if Ben Simmons does start playing the next game, it doesn't mean Kyrie Irving is going to be there. Number one. Number two, the Brooklyn Nets, I think, are still a ninth seed in the Eastern Conference, so they still have some work to do. And maybe some people could say, well, this can be beneficial for Kyrie because now he's playing road games, and that's going to be – if that's your strategy, fine. I just don't think it's a very good strategy to have. But I'm surprised that some people didn't mention the fact that Kyrie should have possibly been traded before James Harden, because we put up a poll on the channel, and I was dumbfounded to see that most people thought James Harden should be the one to be traded. I was like, why? Why would you trade James Harden? He's been the guy that's been there the most. So why would you trade him? But that's what happened, and that's what people think. So what I want to know from you guys, what do you think about what I said? What do you think about the analysis that JJ Redick said? Whatever you guys think, please leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. Again, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell to be notified whenever we drop our content. Once again, this is Charles here from Dreamerspro. Wishing you guys an amazing day and catch you guys on the next episode. Peace.